Our next speaker is Talbot Hack of NETSCOUT.
Thank you, Paul. They happen every 5 seconds, over 700 times an hour, nearly 17,000 times per day, and over 6 million times last year. DDoS, distributed denial of service. It's a form of cyber attack. These attacks are widely distributed. The idea is to take the power of many different devices on the internet and harness them and direct a stream of malicious traffic that is disguised as legitimate traffic towards a specific network target somewhere on the internet. And the hackers or the cyber attackers' goal is to take that network offline by basically disabling and overwhelming them to the point where they can no longer have connectivity. So everybody from 16-year-old punks to nation states to criminal syndicates are in on this game. And unfortunately, it's a chronic problem that's not going away, and it's a reflection of the increased monetization of the cyber threat landscape in our world. So my name is Talbot Hack, and I'm here to tell you that this is a global business story, unfortunately, and as I said, it's a chronic problem that is not going away. So imagine a fire hose pointed at a fire hose of this malicious traffic, pointed at the networks of the institutions that we rely on. The internet pipe for the University of Michigan, the entire ATM network for Chase Bank, the TSA, many other institutions that we take for granted that operate on a daily basis that help us conduct our lives that can be impacted. Now imagine that fire hose pointed at those institutions and not allowing them to, potentially taking them offline for minutes or hours, let alone days. And imagine that fire hose pointed at a country. And this has actually happened in a small West African country about 2 years ago. They were taken offline for weeks because their single internet pipe was blocked with a DDoS attack for political reasons. So unfortunately, a really big problem, and it reflects the fact that DDoS has become a significant potential disruption to not only our socioeconomic, but also our political systems. And the hackers know this, and they're taking advantage of this, and that's why it's become a ubiquitous tool in the cyber hackers toolkit. So here's a simple illustration of how these things work, and forgive us, it's with the short time we have, it's hard to really go through all the details, but the idea is under normal conditions, traffic flows, it ebbs and flows, mostly flows towards us from the internet through what are called internet service providers, or ISPs, down to our businesses, our homes, our devices. But when an attack occurs, the good news is our internet service providers are protected. They have security systems at their security perimeter, and most of the time they block these. They identify and detect them within seconds, and they block the attack so that it's completely transparent and there's no downstream damage. We never see the effect. But occasionally, the smart attackers using really clever tooling are able to penetrate the defenses of the security perimeter, if you will, of the internet service provider and actually get through and achieve the intended goal, which is to take the downstream victim offline. And it's typically not individuals, it's typically targeting larger networks, data centers, things like that, where there can really be a significant impact. So there are two types of DDoS attacks. The one that's most common is what we call the brute force or the volumetric attack. This is all about the knockout punch. It's about the saturation of the link, of the internet link, and kill the firewall, kill all that stuff that's at the front of our network that's in theory protecting us, just knock it out. These are the attacks that you tend to hear about in the news. They get the press. The problem here is that these are becoming more frequent, they're becoming more complex, and they're becoming much bigger. And these can be multi-terabit attacks. And just to give you a sense of what that means, that's like the entire combined bandwidth that Comcast has in the Midwest. So you're talking about massive amounts of data that can just completely wipe out a network. And it's, again, a reflection of increasing sophistication, maturity, diversification in the hacker community, and unfortunately, the increasing sophistication and automation of their attack tooling at very large scale. So it becomes difficult, even for the largest and most protected, well-protected networks like the internet service providers, it's becoming more and more difficult for them to protect against these things. The other type of attack is more of a finesse. It's more of a surgical approach. They attack specific applications and services running within the victim network. They are much more complex to build, and they again require a high level of sophistication. So the good news is they're much less common, but they tend to be reflected by nation states and other well-funded actors that can actually invest the R&D effort to make this happen. But when they do have an impact, they can be really deadly. The other thing about these attacks, which is scary, is that they tend to be what we call the first vector on a multi-vector attack, meaning they'll use an obfuscation, they'll use a DDoS attack over here to distract and disable the network while they sneak in the back door. Because their real goal is to infiltrate the network, to implant malware, to perform criminal extortion, to perform industrial espionage, and a host of other reasons. So these attacks can actually be quite deadly. So our company collects traffic data from all over the globe. We have hundreds of sensors located all around the internet, and we see 1/3 of all internet traffic on a minute-by-minute basis. We use that information, we curate it, we do analytics on it, and we take that information in order to not only understand evolving traffic patterns across the world, but also to develop new vaccines, as we call them, as new cyber threats emerge. So we can create, if you will, antidotes to new problems that appear on the internet. This is a depiction, this is essentially a snapshot of 1 hour ago last week, a Thursday evening. This is showing all the DDoS activity occurring across the globe at that one moment. You think of them as thousands of digital snowballs being thrown across the globe. Here's the good news. Most of these attacks fail and become a transparent thing. They get blocked because there are systems in place to protect against it. That's the good news. The not so good news, our hyper-connected world makes this chronic problem much harder to manage. If you think about all of the, up to now, right now, it's about 30 million internet-facing devices that exist on the planet. And millions of those have already been digitally owned and enslaved in what are called botnets. And there's a bot master who is somebody who can control these devices. They've implanted malware on these devices. And I'm talking about webcams, I'm talking about smart street lamps, I'm talking about all those smart things that we have that are, could be university research servers, which is unfortunately a big problem. And they have this malware has been implanted on these devices. And the bot master, at basically a click of a few keystrokes, can cause that digital army to rise up and direct an attack towards a particular target, which is an IP address or a complete network, a business, et cetera. So a very difficult problem. So for you Game of Thrones fans, think of this as the bot master is the Night King, and he is commanding his army, the army of the dead, the digital army of the dead, to attack Winterfell and digitally blast through the ramparts, breach the ramparts. And they are relentless. They don't sleep, they don't eat. They will continue to push until they get through. The other thing that it's important to know about all these devices is that there are hackers and very sophisticated cyber attackers that are constantly scanning the internet. And we have data to prove, and this is not just our data, this has been proven multiple times over, that they are scanning any new devices that are plugged into the internet. And within minutes, if those devices have any vulnerabilities, they have been compromised and they can be enslaved, digitally enslaved into these botnet architectures. So it's a substantial ongoing problem. So I'll leave you with this. I think Congressman Sensenbrenner got it all wrong. The internet is an essential utility for the conduct of commerce in our daily life. And the big question that we should all ask ourselves is, what can we do, our little part, to help protect this essential utility for the good use of all? And I have a few prescriptions that I'll take the I'll take the initiative to throw out there. I think for you, IT professionals that are running larger organizations and businesses, make sure you have a comprehensive security strategy, a network security strategy, not just for your laptops, but how do you protect your whole network. A comprehensive security strategy that includes DDoS protections. And make sure you test it in peacetime so that you know it works when you're really under the gun. For those of you that are software developers, that are IT professionals developing network designs, make sure you understand about networking. Make sure you learn and understand about security so that you can take that design thinking, that discipline, and invoke it into your software designs early on, not as an afterthought. And for all the rest of us, we need to practice better security hygiene, as we call it, at home. We need to make sure our smart devices are locked down with appropriate security measures. Make sure all the security features are turned on. Don't just plug something, your pet cam and your whatever onto the internet and not think about it, because it's probably working on a botnet somewhere, DDoSing somebody on the other side of the planet. And I'll leave you with this: is I think the health and wellness of our global internet depends on us doing all the right things. Thank you very much.